The thing you're bringing up is the slippery slope argument that you're going to
Sure.
hear from conservatives, which is, okay, you do this. This is just a half measure that's on the way to raising the age for firearms or things like that. I think the flip side of that is what you're going to hear from Republicans after this passes, maybe not before, is that they're not going to do anything on this issue for a long time and see how
Perhaps.
this works.
Yeah, I know that
And-
they're viewing this as like a pressure relief valve sort of situation,
Right.
right? Politically.
Right. I mean, they want to talk. I mean, look, like, this is not something they want to talk about to win the midterm elections. I mean, it's
Right.
much more simple. It's Biden's unpopular, inflation is bad. That's the whole Republican campaign, and that's what a lot of people in the United States care about right now. And so the idea from the McConnell side of Republican leadership is, hey, I feel good about where he feels good about where they are politically, and doing this doesn't do anything to change that in his view.
I wonder, I mean, that's right. That's obviously the calculation. I wonder how true it is. Like if you piss off all the gun rights groups heading into a midterm, I don't, is that good for your turnout? I don't know.
It may not be.
I mean, I guess we'll
think there
see.
may, and then from the Democratic side, similar, right? Like their messaging to their supporters, gun control groups, but also liberal voters and things like that is that we're going to come back and get more after this. This is just the first step,
Right.
and that's similarly interesting messaging, because they may lose control of Congress in just a few months, and they're not going to get more than that. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I think to get the things that Democrats have been talking about for a long time, assault weapons ban, expanded or universal background checks, you probably need to get rid of the legislative filibuster.
I think you need more than that, because even if you got rid of the filibuster today, I don't think they could pass an assault weapons ban. They haven't passed one through the House.
I
even
agree.
after
I
these
mean,
changes.
part of getting rid of the filibuster right now would be having more Democratic seats, right? Like, so you'd have to have a larger majority, and you'd have to have
you have to have a significantly lot,
because
they
55-ish seats is probably what I would envision.
what did they get to? I think they barely got to 218 in their own party on magazine bans in that House
Right.
package.
Yep.
They haven't tried to do an assault weapons ban since they took control in 2018. Because I mean, I think the brass tacks is they don't have the votes for it. That's
Right.
pretty obvious, right? So it's not just like the NRA money that's stopping it, right?
It's structural. It's the structure of American politics, how the Senate is currently constituted, and how far a big Democratic majority in both chambers is with a Democratic president, right? Like those things could all be very far away. And it's interesting because at the time, the pre-impeachment talks about this, I had thought the incentive structures aligned a little bit more for Republicans, because you could have Trump pushing them to sign on to something that was a little out of their comfort zone. He was going there, and then obviously it fell apart because he got very angry about impeachment.
Right.
But will there be another Republican president that dives into this issue? It seems
Maybe.
doubtful to me, but
Trump's been out there attacking this, or at least his spokesperson has been out there attacking the deal so far. So,
right.
I don't know.
And I think the place you'll see that manifest itself the most is if and when this comes to the House, where they really listen to what Trump's saying a lot more. I think you'll get,
the Democrats are going to have to pass this on very thin margins if they do it.
Right. And it continues a dynamic we've been seeing in the Senate, where more Senate Republicans will vote for things than House Republicans, despite the fact there's 4 times as many House Republicans as there are Senate Republicans.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you'll get probably the 4 or 5 that voted for the House package would probably vote for this. I don't know how many more you get beyond that, honestly.
Yeah, and I would be interested in where if any of the Texas House members, Republicans, are even considering voting for this, because it's the big player, I think, here is John Cornyn, the senior senator from Texas, and I'm interested to see how this affects his own internal politics, both at home and here in Washington.
Yeah, because one thing that's been interesting. First of all, John Cornyn was supposed to be on the show this week, but he wasn't able to make it, so he's going to be on next week. So we will be able to talk directly to him about all of this, which will be good. He did do Dana Loesch's show, so it's not as though he's avoiding these sorts of interviews,
right.
I'd say, but he just didn't have the time. It didn't work out, but next week we're supposed to do it. We'll see how it goes. But yeah.
He'd probably rather do it after the
tax
deal is done, right?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But he's got to, the interesting thing about him, right, is that he is the one that gives a lot of credibility to this deal because he's been the go-to guy on guns in the Senate for Republicans for, a long time. And I think that's probably why they were able to get to 10 off the bat, is because he joined in on it.
Yeah.
But Cornyn is taking a lot of personal responsibility for this deal. A lot of this is hinging on what he says and does. And he has already made some comments that indicate the deal might be in trouble. I don't know. What's your feeling about that? He obviously came out and said that there's issues with, you alluded to this earlier, there's issues with the red flag funding. Yep. And there's issues with the boyfriend, what exactly constitutes a boyfriend, right? We have domestic violence right now means violence against anyone that you're related to, that you cohabit with, in a romantic relationship, or you have a child with, or you're married to, right? Those are the four things. They want to expand it to people who you're in a romantic relationship with, but you don't live with.
How do you define that?
Yeah.
That's what's challenging now, because Democrats would like that to be a broad definition.
Mm-hmm.
Cornyn said yesterday, I want that to be pretty narrow. I don't want this to just sweep up everybody that's ever been convicted of these things, because it could be many years ago.
Right.
That's his reasoning here. And so, no, I don't think this thing's ever been so far in danger of completely falling apart this week. But I think, what you're seeing is maybe what's frustrated Democrats in the past on other issues is Cornyn's a pretty tough negotiator. He's not afraid to use the press as a negotiating tactic to say this thing's going to fall apart if you don't come to the table. You know what I mean? So he's playing. That's an outside game where he's making people say focus, let's get this done. I'm serious. And then I'm not in the room, so I don't know, but he's got a separate inside game where he has a legit relationship with Chris Murphy. They've worked on improving the instant background check system a few years ago. He's got a legit relationship with Kyrsten Sinema. They've traveled to the border together and have written immigration legislation together. So I think that's the two sides that he's showing. And it's not lost on me when I see a story in Fox News saying, here's all the things John Cornyn has kept out of this bill, right? That's the way he's trying to message it publicly to conservatives, which is to say, I'm fighting for you, and we ended up with these smaller things. I kept these big things out. You and I know the assault weapons ban, universal background checks, these were not in the discussions, but this is the way he's sort of messaging it to kind of the right and gun owners who care a lot about this issue.
Yeah, I wonder if that works, it's obviously that's his message he's trying to put out, that they are stopping these other proposals by agreeing to these more limited ones. But the counter to that is that they could just not agree to this deal either. There's nothing forcing them to do it. So you look at it, one thing that's interesting for him, I think, is, in the early days after Uvalde, we wrote at the Reload a piece about, what's on the table, what could happen. And you look at Florida after Parkland, and they passed, a red flag bill. They raised the age to buy AR-15s and other similar firearms to 21. And then, so in theory, you could see something like that happen in Texas, because they're politically similar states. Texas is kind of trending a little more blue, maybe not as much as a lot of people in media like to think it is, but and then Florida's trending more red over time. I think everyone acknowledges that. And so they're somewhere close to each other. They're very large states, but instead what we've seen is, Abbott has talked about upping enforcement with the laws that they passed recently. They had a lie and try bill that he came out and he sent a letter saying, we should do more to enforce our current laws instead of pushing for any sort of red flag or boyfriend loophole stuff that's in this federal deal that Cornyn is backing. So there's pretty different approaches, it seems like.
Yeah, and I know Rick Scott pretty well as a senator, and I covered his Senate race in 2018, and he was in this unique position, right, where he's the governor running for senator. So he signs the bill that you just talked about, and that's not something, he wants to see on a federal level. So in some ways, the political incentives for him were different than they would be for Greg Abbott, in Texas. And by the same token, like, what are Cornyn's incentives? This is a guy who talks openly about wanting to be the Republican leader
Right.
at some point. Does this help him or hurt him in that
Yeah.
quest? I think it depends on how many votes he gets from Republicans. He told me yesterday he wants 70 plus. That would mean 20 Republicans vote for him. That seems like a high bar. If he could meet it, I think it helps him, right?
Yeah, if he can, but I mean,
But if he gets 11, that may not help him.
yeah, that's.
But
the
he was
problem.
also just reelected. He was just reelected, and in my view, on a lot of issues, he's sort of the median Republican. So when he's involved in negotiations, it feels like there's a chance you get 60 votes when you have a narrowly divided Senate like we have now. So that's why he's been involved in immigration negotiations. That's why he's been involved in criminal justice reform negotiations. You know, it's like sometimes Susan Collins or Lindsey Graham will be involved in negotiations, and they're important deal makers too, but do they bring along a large chunk of the conference? And sometimes the answer is no. With Cornyn, the answer has proven to be yes so far. And by large chunk, 10. 10 is significant. That's the most important number. Republicans in the Senate will care if it's a lot more than 10, and reporters like me will care a lot more, but probably Americans are just going to be paying attention to whether it passes or not.